Hello, I am Dr. Luigi. It's been a while since my last presentation, but as a man of both math and science, I've returned to examine one of the strangest cases of life ever discovered, one that exists entirely on a grid. Today, we'll be analyzing Conway's game of life, and how it connects to linear algebra. Let's begin, shall we? What is Conway's game of life? I'm glad you asked. Created by the late mathematician John Conway in 1970, the game of life isn't really a game at all. It's a cellular automaton, a mathematical model where simple rules applied repeatedly can create patterns that behave like living organisms. Let's dive into how the game of life works. The grid is made of cells, each either alive or dead. Every turn, a cell's fate depends on its 8 neighbors, 2 or 3 neighbors it lives on. Exactly 3. New life is born. Otherwise, death by loneliness or overcrowding. In the image, the green central cell is alive, the black neighbor cell is alive, while all other white cells are dead. From these simple rules, entire ecosystems emerge, from stable blocks to pulsing blinkers, and even creatures that appear to move, like the famous glider. The blinker oscillates between the pictured vertical and horizontal states. I'm sure the question on your mind is this, but Dr. Luigi, where does linear algebra enter the picture? Let's dive into that now. Each generation of the grid can be represented as a matrix of zeros and ones. 0 for dead, 1 for alive. Every update is like performing a transformation on that matrix. In the above images, a green square, alive, corresponds to a value of 1, while a white square, dead, is a 0. To calculate neighbors, we use what's called a convolution kernel. It's a small matrix that sums nearby cells, a perfect example of matrix multiplication in action. In the image, we count all the green squares, the neighbors, but the white central cell is not counted. When the grid is flattened into a vector, each generation can be computed as n of t equals m times O of t, where m is a large, sparse matrix encoding all neighbor relationships. This is a classic linear algebra transformation. Once the neighbor totals are known, the game of life applies its birth and survival rules. Mathematically, that's like filtering the vector through a nonlinear function, deciding which entries stay 1 and which return to 0. In the example shown, cells 1, 2 and 2, 1 each have exactly 3 neighbors, and thus, come to life. Fascinating. Some patterns behave predictably and repeat every few turns, much like eigenvectors in linear algebra. For instance, a blinker returns to its original state every 2 steps, an eigenpattern with an eigenvalue of 1. Let's look at 2 examples to see how they differ. Here we have our blinker pattern, a well-known example in the game of life. We start with the vertical state at time t equals 0. It changes to the horizontal state at time t equals 1, and then reverts back to vertical at time t equals 2. This gives us our eigenpattern. A of t plus 2 equals A of t. The mathematical parallel is that when a pattern repeats every k steps, A of t plus k equals lambda A of t, where lambda equals 1 for a perfect repeat. Here we have a static block pattern that never changes. A of t plus 1 equals A of t. This is a true fixed point, where lambda equals 1 once again. In both examples, we've found an eigenpattern with an eigenvalue of 1. Stable patterns correspond to fixed points, configurations that don't change under the transformation. Patterns that vanish entirely resemble vectors that map to 0. In other words, they fall into the null space. As you can see above, our block pattern is static, but the other pattern dies out fast, sometimes after just 1 or 2 generations, which models the null space outcome. A of t plus k equals 0. This entire world emerges from basic linear algebra operations, sums, transformations, and thresholds. It shows how mathematics can model complexity, even when the rules are minimal. If you're interested, run your own simulation sometime, and see how life unfolds. Conway's model demonstrates how linear algebra powers modeling in physics, computer graphics, biology, and beyond. The game of life stands as a visual reminder of that connection, and one that I hope you're able to appreciate as much as I am. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you were able to learn something. Conway's game of life can produce entire worlds of movement and meaning, and serves as a fun reminder that linear algebra is more than just numbers on a page. This has been Dr. Luigi, signing off. See you next time.